what's up, everybody? I am the Dharma Guy. You are, of course, watching Dharma Time here on WPSN99.com. I'm actually really excited today. Let me go ahead and pull up our guest here real quick. I'm going to pull up Louis so you can see him eating. There you go. Look at him. What's up, the Dope Doctor? How you doing?
I'm good.
You're good. Is that good, man? What is that the Snickers or is that the sausage?
This is Snickers.
There you go. Right on. And you got some really good news you're going to share here in a second. And then, of course, here's our guest, Mr. Johnny Crowder, the one and only, from copenotes.com. What's going on, brother?
Howdy, howdy.
What's up, Johnny?
So, let me go ahead and pull everybody up here and get things going. First and foremost, thank you guys for watching. As always, we are able to do this because of the Now Matters More Foundation, amongst our many other sponsors that you saw at the top of the clip there. But the one we try to really put the number out and focus on is the Now Matters More Foundation, in which we help individuals struggling with the disease of addiction. As always, you can go to nowmattersmore.org, and you can check out who we are. You can donate. We always take donations. Thank you very much for that. You can also fill out an application for help, or you can just peruse a little bit and see who we are and what we do. And of course, if you don't want to do that, you can always call 833 Now Matters. That's 833 Now Matters, and we'll help you get where you need to be. So, anyways, first off, how is everybody doing today?
Fantastic.
Right on. And
is the day.
let's get to your good news first, real quick, Louis, because I think that it requires some acknowledgement here. So,
Awesome.
you want to share what took place over the weekend in your family?
Yeah, I had a young gentleman come over to the house and sit my wife and I down and ask for my oldest daughter's hand in marriage. So congratulations, John.
Right on.
John Reyes is now committed to my daughter, Dalia Delgado, and they'll be getting married in the spring of 22, I guess.
Right
So,
on. Oh, 22.
awesome.
Okay.
22, yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, about a year and a half, something like that. I mean, they bought a house together this past year. They're 20 years old. Well, my daughter just turned 21. They bought a house together. Now they're making the next step. So I guess they're doing it kind of reverse, but at least it wasn't the baby house. Then
Right.
it was the house. Then you know, they did it right, I guess. You know, let's see if we can make a big purchase together and live together first,
Right.
and then
Right.
get married.
Yeah, no,
cool
I mean,
with
that's awesome, man. I'm very happy for him. You know, I know
Yeah,
both of them, obviously. John seems like a really good kid.
Yeah.
I'm extremely excited, I guess, or you know, proud of the fact that there's still people out there that do things the right way.
Yeah.
I sincerely hope that you know, when my daughters, that I have some other young boy who's interested in has the same kind of respect that he has. I think that's admirable. I really do.
Yeah.
You know, not
Yeah,
that you
it's
have to, I guess, but I respect that. I think it's really cool. So,
Let me tell you something. For you know, first they were friends first. Then he asked me in that same house if he could date her, and then asked her, and she said yes. Then they bought that house, and then now he asked her to marry her in that very house. So that's pretty cool, man.
and she
That's
said
pretty cool.
yes,
And
by the way.
the house is at 2020, so it's the year 2020. So it's all kinds of
Right.
cool. Yeah, she said
She
yes.
said, yeah, I saw her post on there, so she did say yes. I don't think there was ever a doubt, but it's cool, man. I'm happy for him. That's really cool.
That would have been an awkward moment that
Right?
night. He would have said no. Like, what do we do with the house now?
Exactly. But anyways, I digress. So on today's topic, first and foremost, let me preface this all by saying that I am very excited to have Mr. Crowder on with us today. As I was telling him prior to us going live, you know, for those of you who watch on a regular basis here on Dharma Time, we don't have a ton of guests on here. And that's by choice. I'm very particular on who we have come on here. I want to make sure that they, you know, bring the kind of value that I'm looking for. And I was really excited to have Johnny on because if you watch the Couch Live, we had him on talking about Cope Notes, which I'll give him obviously some time today to talk about that as well. But I was just impressed, man. He just seems like a really good guy with a good head on his shoulders and just kind of gets it. And so I definitely was wanting some insight from him, and we were trying to communicate to figure out how we can get him on the show and get his story out there and talk a little bit. And we were having just a little bit of difficulty kind of coordinating some times. And then I saw a post that he did a couple weeks back on his Facebook that, first and foremost, I was like, holy shit, like, I hope he's okay. But then I also immediately knew what we could have as far as a topic is, as long as he was comfortable with it. And that post was that he told everybody that he contracted COVID-19 or coronavirus. So first and foremost, let me start with, how are you, man?
I am relieved that So I'm on the tail end of it. So for people who don't have a bearing on like how long this takes or anything like that, I was exposed on my birthday on July 26th.
Oh, damn, that sucks, dude. I didn't know that.
And what's also wild is the whole point of me. So obviously I didn't have a birthday party, right? Because I'm like, well, I don't want to get a bunch of people together. It's probably not safe. So I was like, I'll just see my friend Zach. Little did I know that my buddy Zach, who I've known, he's my first friend of my whole life. I met him when I was like 6 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so this is the ultimate betrayal. So I went to see him, and then afterwards, a couple days after I saw him, he was like, hey, I just want to let you know my wife has just tested positive for COVID because someone at her work had it. And I was like, oh, well, let me know if you wind up with it, because you guys kiss on the mouth, obviously. So, and I was pretty dang close to you. And then a couple days later, he's like, hey, I tested positive. I'm like, well, that's you guys. Like, I feel great. And then that night, it was like a freight train. Wow. Like, there, between exposure and me actually experiencing a symptom, it was it was 3 or 4 days before I even felt a hint of anything. And when it hit, it freaking slammed me. So if you would have spoken to me a couple weeks ago, I was a baby. I was like, I was reduced to like a blubbering mess. But I don't want to exaggerate what it was like, because I have asthma and I thought that I would have to be hospitalized and stuff. But ultimately, for me, it was one really bad day. And then the rest of it was like a flu or a cold, things that we experience often. So I think that I got super lucky with it to be symptom free for now a couple days.
Wow. And you said in your post that you also actually exposed your sister as well, right?
Yeah. So we live together, and I didn't even, I didn't know Zach had it, and then I didn't know I had it. So of course, how are you gonna self-quarantine in an apartment as small as this, and you wind up in the same spaces all the time? So I feel super bad actually, because she has a cough now that is more persistent than the one that I had. So she's a few days behind me, and I feel bad because I'll like be working and I hear her cough in the other room, and I'm like, what have I done?
And that's your sister too. So if I was her, I would use that for the rest of my life. I would just be behind you and be like, I need help.
Yeah, she's got leverage now for sure.
That's awesome.
That's making me want to cough.
And so, from your post, it was interesting because I think your post really kind of shadowed what a lot of people are going through, right? And what I read was, at the very beginning, you were quite OCD about things, and you were very cautious, and you were very kind of hyper-focused about it. And then as time went on, you started kind of get a little bit more comfortable with it, and it kind of out of sight, out of mind almost. And then, bam, it happens. So, can you talk on that just a little bit? Because I think we're all experiencing that. I know I am.
Yeah, I look back and I'm like, wow, I was honestly pretty reckless a couple times. Like, and there was one day in particular that I think of. This was like 4 months in or something. And we went out to the pool because they had reopened the pool in our complex. Right. And there was nobody there. So it was just us. And then a bunch of kids came in the pool. And I was like, oh, crap, what do we do? Like, do we leave? Or what's the policy here? Like, does chlorine kill COVID or what? And so my sister and I were in the pool, and we just stayed. And then we wound up, like, kind of hanging out with there was, like, this kid's birthday party. And there were all these kids jumping in the pool and squirting each other with squirt guns. So, like, we grabbed some squirt guns and started, like, shooting these kids with the squirt guns. And I just remember being like, if this is how I get COVID... Right. I remember thinking this will be worth it because this is my first time interacting with strangers in so long. And I missed other people so much that I was like, I subconsciously was like, if this is how I get COVID, it will have been worth it. And I look back at moments where I've bent the rules, and it's all been because I've been lonely and I miss people. Right. It's not because I don't take COVID seriously. It's because... it's fatigue. The first couple months, you're like, I will make my home a fortress. And then a few months later, you're like, I want to give the postman a hug, Well,
and I think that's part of the reason why I was so excited to have you on, because
You wanted to hug him?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But no, you strike me as somebody who is pretty spiritually grounded for the most part, and so I was definitely curious to kind of hear your take on the whole kind of pendulum of everything here, right? Like, and feel free to go into as much or as little details you're comfortable with, but because I don't know everything, I just know the little bits that we heard when we were on the couch. But it seems like you had a challenging life, I guess, and you were able to overcome some of that, and you were to find some of your own spirituality and your own coping and things of that nature, which led ultimately to coming up with Coke Notes, and you've achieved a certain level of success with that. And then you were actually able to put those into further practice with this whole COVID thing and stuff. So I'd like you to expand on some of that,
Um,
as much as you're comfortable with, obviously.
I mean, it's interesting. I like to think that my life experience up until now has equipped me for COVID, but really nothing has done that. Like, this is a pretty big curveball for even people who do a lot of work on themselves, and they're really like, they focus on self-care, and they actively work to solve their own problems and take care of themselves. And like, this honestly has reminded me of how human I am. Like, a lot of times I'm like, man, I've been, my band wrote a song called Still Alive, and it has this part that's like, kill me if you can, kill me if you can. And it's this like, it's this attitude of like, I've been abused, I've survived suicide, I've survived all of these different diagnoses, I've had a terrible life, and here I am, I'm still alive, I'm strong. And then COVID hits, and you're like, what the heck is this? I don't have any past experience that has equipped me for something at this scale. And I think it's the most difficult part for me has been not just applying what I have learned to the way that I live now during COVID, but also, this is much harder for me, giving myself the grace to understand that it's okay to have a hard time with what's going on right now. And if I drop the ball, or if I make mistakes, or if I don't fully comprehend what I'm experiencing right now, the hardest thing for me to do is go, hey buddy, it's okay, nobody really knows what's going on. I'm always like, I should be strong. And it's like, I'm learning. This year has made me very aware of my limits as a human.
Right. Now what specifically, because that was it, is it the illness, or is it the fact, because it sounds like it's even before the illness, is it the fact that you're actually practicing the safeness right? Because I can easily see individuals that it doesn't look like their life changed much at all, other than where they're able to go, at what time they're able to go, and who they're able to do it with. But as far as quarantining, where I'm at least, in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, there's not a whole heck of a lot of quarantining except for that first month or so.
Mm-hmm.
So is that what you're talking about, the fact that you're kind of doing it right, and you're kind of staying very limited to your interactions?
I think so. Part of it is, I saw someone who said something brilliant that I might butcher, but I'll try to relate to you guys. She said, the reason why I'm so fatigued and exhausted during COVID is because I feel like this is the woman who said this, not me. She said, I feel like I'm putting all of my effort into holding up this umbrella during a monsoon. And I'm seeing people play around and think that it's not raining. Yeah. And she's like, I'm so tired because I see other people just living their life like nothing has changed, and here I am trying to protect my grandmother, or trying to protect my kids, or trying to I'm high risk, or whatever it is, or I got laid off. So I think whether or not your specific part of the country is adhering to certain guidelines doesn't make as big of a difference as whether or not you are a person living on the planet during this, because the way that it's changing interpersonal interactions, like the way that we think of other people, I think we're going to see the ripple effect of this throughout our entire lives. Like how people who grew up during the Great Depression think about money differently. We are going to think about social interaction differently forever.
I agree with that. I had a friend that told me I'm gonna start bowing. That's gonna be my new thing. Like the Asians do. I said, "Yep, I like that bowing thing."
Well, I thought about that the other day. Right, like we might grow up in a society where handshakes are just a thing of the past. Like I remember,
I think they're done.
Well, I remember growing up. You measured a lot by a handshake. A firm, steady handshake. That's what I was taught. And then I might not teach that to my son now. It's just like a weird kind of thing. Like it's kind of hard to comprehend, right? But
Well, especially when you learn that so many people don't wash their hands. I mean,
right,
that's
Yeah.
yeah,
I shook hands because I had confidence in you guys. But now that I know a lot of you guys
yeah.
don't wash your hands, I'm done. I'm not shaking any of your hands anymore.
Dude, there are literally times on tour where like I'll be in the bathroom before a set, like I'll be wetting my hair or something, and then I go play, and at the merch table, this guy goes to shake my hand, and I'm like, I saw you in the men's bathroom, and you didn't wash your hand after you went to the bathroom, and now you want me to shake your hand, and I like once you've been in a public restroom, you're like, all of you guys are so dirty.
So many,
COVID or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
I want to out them. I so want to out them when I see them do that. But I do always go back to my table and see that guy over there with the red shirt.
Didn't wash his hands.
Wash his hands.
Well, you brought up something a few minutes ago that I absolutely want to highlight on, right? Because I think I know I myself went through my moment with it, and I think several other people have as well. And you said that you basically had to almost give yourself permission to not be perfect through this, right? Because I have my own little like miniature breakdown moment in the relatively beginning stages of this, right? Like, being home, trying to console my wife, who was also sent home from work, and she's a very personable person, and having that taken away from her and having her stressed and worrying about it. I had my mother, who's in a high risk category. I myself apparently finding out I'm in a high risk category, and then my kids were going through the beginning stages of the schooling stuff, and that was a complete and utter disaster to begin with. Everybody was ill prepared for it, and so there's just so many things all going on at once. And I had a moment with my wife where she was just like kind of getting, her patience was waning with me a little bit. And I just had my moment where I like, not necessarily exploded, but I definitely was passionate. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, man. Like, I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying, and I'm failing in certain areas. But this is all due to me too. You guys are all looking at me to be the rock, and I'm doing my best. But understand that this is hard for me as well. Like, and I had a little bit of guilt in the sense of I am the Dharma guy, right? Like, I've been through a lot of stuff in my life, and I've been able to become a very strong, almost immovable object spiritually because of that. And I'm typically the one that people look to solve their problems. And so I have this overwhelming, almost duty, if you will, to be that for other people. And so I forget sometimes that I am still human, right? And so, yeah, I had that same moment, and I had the associated guilt with it, where I did have to kind of take a step back and say, no, it's okay. Like, it's all right that nobody knows, right? But I think a lot of people struggle with that, especially because I think a lot of times we as humans, don't necessarily appreciate the strength of those around us. Like, we have individuals around us that we turn to in times of need, and we sometimes get lulled into this idea that they're invincible, right? Like, I could think of an example, a lesser example, but even Louis, right? I had a moment with Louis one time where, this was early on in my marriage, where we were kind of just still learning how to be married, essentially. And I looked at Louis with like 30 years, and I've been around them, and it's like, damn, why am I not like that? And so he had to let me know, like, nah, bro, like, we got our moments, it happens. And it's such a logical thing, but I needed to hear that and realize, like, yeah, like, it's hard. And so I think with the COVID thing, I think people are going through that as well. I think people, especially our stronger ones, they need to realize it's okay to struggle a little bit. And then the other people who typically depend on them need to understand they're still human. Yes, they help you. Yes, they're strong, but they're still struggling as well, and it's okay. So I'm glad you kind of pointed it out, man.
Dude, I had this conversation with God the other day where I was like, what do I do? What do I do? What am I supposed to do? Like, how do I help? We're in an economic crisis. How do I help my business survive this? I saw an article the other day that was 1,200 Tampa Bay companies have closed.
Wow.
Since COVID began. 1,200. That's like more businesses than I knew existed in this area. And it's like companies are dropping like flies. And then not to mention bands are breaking up because you can't tour. You can't hardly put out music because most of the time you release a record and then you go on tour immediately to start your album cycle. So I'm like, God, what do I do to help my band? What do I do to help my business? What do I do to help myself? How do I connect with people? What am I supposed to do? And God's like, oh, you're gonna do it? Oh, so the world turns upside down and everything shuts down, and there's death, and there's illness, and there's economic crisis, and there's unemployment, and there's homelessness, and there's this tremendous social inequality, and you're gonna do it? You're gonna come up with the perfect solution for this? Dude, it felt like God was like, you're expecting so much of yourself that you were doing a poor job with the very few things I've delegated to you. And sometimes I do that. I'm like, really, I'm only in charge of a couple things. And I extend myself to be like, oh, all right, God, that's it. I'm going to solve racism. And it's like, what? Like, there are steps, and you should educate yourself. You should work on this stuff. But the moment you say, I'm going to save my business, or I don't even think I'm going to save my business is as dangerous as me saying something like, I'm going to save the economy.
Yeah.
I'm going to save retail business altogether. Like, whether we say that stuff out loud or not, a lot of us really do expect ourselves to do these larger than life things. And I love having goals. And I think all of your dreams should be unrealistic. I think you should say stuff like that regularly without holding yourself to the expectation so tightly that each day you don't save the planet or find every day that you don't discover the cure for COVID is not a failure. And I think that's what I fall into. It's not the dream that's dangerous. It's associating not reaching that dream with failure.
Right. And you bring up a good point, because I think that's where, when I see some people really sink into some serious depression and anxiety over all this, it's not just that they may be financially strapped or closing. I think that a lot of them take on other people's problems or the world's problems, and they want shoulders to be the shoulders. And so when they see, the country self-destruct like it is, they feel a sense of responsibility in that, which some of it is fine to have a sense of responsibility in your own orbit, but to try to take on more than what you can really manage or do and take on the emotion that goes along with that is very difficult. So I think you're making a very valid point with that. And I like that God is sarcastic, by the way.
Oh yeah, he pops off.
One of my the phrases.
I love that. He's the king of sarcasm. I love it. Or she. I don't know his pronouns.
Sure. One of my buddies, Terrence, man, back in the day, he used to say this phrase to me, which, being a non-religious individual, it was always interesting for him to tell me, but it made so much sense, and it was such a simple phrase that it still stuck with me over the years. And he was basically saying, "Hey, even Jesus couldn't save everybody." And so, like, this expectation that I had that I could go save the world, especially with what Louie and I do for a living, we want to save everybody. We think that we are capable. But yeah, my buddy was just like, hey man, even Jesus couldn't save everybody. And he's right. Even, if you are a religious individual, this supposed perfect human being couldn't save the entire world. So what makes you think you're going to? And I agree with you.
I don't know if I shared this on the couch, but my knuckles literally say save them.
Nice.
Oh, that looks cool.
And that's my I'm telling you, like when I was a kid, my hero was Captain Planet. It's like he's our hero, guys.
The power is yours.
He's literally gonna take pollution.
That's awesome.
Okay, now you wait. Now earlier I said a bunch of names that you didn't know. I'm lost.
You don't know
Captain
who Captain Planet is?
Please. No, I don't know.
He's the only hero who cared about saving the planet, which seems like you would think Superman and Spider-Man and Batman, they all care about the planet, but Captain Planet literally was like, we're going to stop pollution.
Yeah.
Where is he? Like, who created him? Is it a Marvel?
I don't remember. He was like a supernatural being, but he had all these other people who would, they would combine their powers and save, essentially recycling and things of that nature. Yeah, it was actually entertaining.
I didn't know we had a recycling superhero.
That's probably why he's not still around.
I was going to say.
Because corporations were like, no.
Exactly.
Let's focus on Batman because he runs a company and capitalism.
And Iron Man did very well.
Yes.
Yeah, I think ever since I was little, I was like, well, the moment I find out there's something wrong, I'm like, well, I'll fix it. I'll save that person. Yeah, I'll adopt 30 million kids in foster care. I'll do whatever it takes. And I think as I get older, I'm realizing, and it's hard to balance because I have PMA tattooed on my stomach, positive mental attitude. It's huge. It's my whole torso. So it's difficult for me to say something like what I'm about to say. But I'm getting used to reconciling those two things. I am a single human being. I sneeze. I spill juice. I make one time actually I washed a microfiber cloth with a white t-shirt and it ruined both somehow.
You're evil. You're evil.
Dude,
Horrible
I'm
person,
telling
man.
you, I make constant mistakes and I don't allow myself the same grace that I allow other people. Like, think about this, dude. This was a wake-up call for me. When I had COVID, I'm not even joking, I did not reschedule or miss a single meeting. Now, that may sound like I'm a boss. I beasted my way through COVID. Yeah. That's some toxic masculinity, toxic positivity kind of stuff. If someone else had COVID and they canceled a month of meetings, I would not blink twice. But I wouldn't allow myself to move one single meeting. And that's what I'm trying to work on in myself now is why do I put this, the amount of pressure that I put on myself is 100 times of what I would expect from anybody else.
So walk us through that a little bit, because when you said that's toxic masculinity and stuff like that, we'll walk us through that. So how do you, I mean, what's the wrong or what's the fix or what's the harm?
Well, when I was growing up, if you fell and hurt yourself, it was kind of a rub some dirt in it kind of approach.
Right. Yep.
The problem with rubbing dirt into an open wound is that it gets infected. So I think the same thing applies to mental and emotional struggles. Like if I start tearing up and I'm like, nope, not going to feel this, I'm going to stuff it down. All that means is it's going to be a more expensive problem later, not just monetarily, but I'm talking the tax, the
emotional
toll
tax.
that it takes.
Sure.
So I think the solution, this is really tough for me, is pausing to allow yourself to feel something. So I'm very like, okay, well, I teared up for a second and that was my big cry. So now on to the solution. And I need to give myself enough time to pause. Like, you know, for example, when my sister says, I'm fine. And I'm like, is something wrong? It sounds like you're upset. And she's like, no, I'm fine. I'm like, I sit down and I put my water bottle down and I get comfy and I'm like, let's take our time and parse through this. But for myself, I tell myself I'm fine, and then myself goes, oh, okay, cool. And then we just like breeze right past it.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And then
actually.
she yells at you for giving her COVID.
That's one of the things that. So in the Four Truths and Eightfold Path, right? One of the third one of the Eightfold Path is right speech. Right speech is essentially, truthful and useful. Oftentimes we get stuck in this idea of, oh, well, it's truthful, but is it really useful? It has to be both, right? And then the first thing that most people kind of think of is the way they talk to those around them. Make sure whatever I say to you or say to that person or email or post on my Facebook is truthful and useful. And I tell them that truthful means the truth, right? Which is everybody's perspective, not just my perspective. And so that's typically where they go. And then I usually trump them all when I ask somebody, who's the most important person to have that with? And they'll typically say, like, my kids or my mom. I was like, no, it's you. Nobody in this earth deserves your love and compassion more than you, right? And so when I tell them, I'm like, look, I usually give them a scenario of like a little kid or something, right? If your little niece, your little nephew, or your own child were to come up to you and they made a mistake or they did something improper or poorly or whatever it was, and they would come to you and say like, oh God, I'm so stupid, I'm an idiot, I'm a horrible person, I can't believe I did that. Would you tell that little kid, yeah, you're right, you kind of are stupid, you retard? Like, would you say that to them? And then most people immediately respond the way you did, like, no, I would never say that. And I ask them why, and they're like, well, because it's not true, it's mean, it's hurtful, like, or whatever. I was like, okay, well then why do you talk to yourself that way? If you just told me that it's not really productive, it's actually counterproductive, it hurts, it's not true, and it's not motivating, then why is that your go-to when it comes to motivating yourself? And so I agree with you, like that. I think we as a society do have to get better at that. And I think that some of us leaders, right? Some of us who are those strong ones in our orbit, the ones that people turn to, we do need to get better at giving ourselves the same kind of slack that we give other people. And we have to, not only that, we have to allow other people to give us that slack, right? So it's not just me allowing me to give my slack, but I also have to allow my mom, my wife, or whatever to give me that slack too.
Dude, you just brought up a really good. You just called me out without even knowing it. So when other people tell me what they're going through, like let's say I had a buddy and that buddy owned a business and he had a bunch of opportunities that fell through because of COVID. I'd be like, dude, first of all, none of this was your fault. You had zero control over any of it. Second of all, the fact that you were eligible for these opportunities in the first place means that you're on the right path. You're doing something right. Third of all, these people didn't forget about you. So once COVID starts clearing up, there's still an opportunity for you guys to reconnect. And besides, this is only making what you do that much more important. But then when my opportunities fall through because of COVID, I'm like, I suck. I blew it. So when someone tells me their problems, I create a positive version of their future in my mind. And I'm like, this could happen. This could break through. This could be even better for you than if the other thing didn't, than if the thing that you wanted actually did happen. But for myself, I think, oh, who knows if there will be any positive outcome? It's like, why is it hard for me to paint a positive fictional future for myself when I can do it for other people all day long? It's so... It should not be as difficult as it is.
Sure.
Yeah, it should not. But here's one of the mistakes that a lot of people make. They start identifying themselves as needing that. They start identifying themselves as the kind of person that's what motivates them. So one of the questions then to you would be, do you think that motivates you? That, was this a planned approach on how you treat yourself? In other words, not just is this the way you treat yourself and speak to yourself privately because of conditions that have happened in your past, but is this a way that you speak to yourself and think about yourself because you actually think that's motivational?
I think so. I've just built, anyone who's a leader, I encourage to make a sheet like this. I just made one and I shared it with my team, and it's a sheet that says like, here's our company's identity, here's our core values, like our core beliefs. But then it's like how to communicate with me, how I communicate with others, and here's my management style. And I learned a lot about myself making that sheet. And one of the things that I learned is that I value hope. So if someone tells me that they are working, let's say I'm working with a salesperson, and they say, well, I spoke to some clients today, but we'll see what happens. That does nothing for me. But if someone says, I spoke to some clients today, and this one lady that I spoke to, Teresa, said that she was going to send an email to her uncle, and if he has the same email address as he did before, there might be a chance that he could connect us with the guy who works at the VA in New York City. And then if that happens, then we can see if he knows who we can apply for CARES Act funding. And I'm like, that's enough for me. I needed some sort of glimmer of a possibility, of an opportunity. Like, I don't need something to be a sure bet to put fuel in my tank. All I need to do is dream. That's literally, I have a die-cast Lamborghini Aventador on my desk. I don't need a Lamborghini as much as I need the idea of a Lamborghini to keep me focused on my work. So
a lot cheaper.
Yeah, this was like $15. But I genuinely think that if you have a really good imagination, and they've done studies on this, like the way that your brain responds to imagining buying something versus actually buying it when you're in a store. They did this study where you find all the stuff you want in a clothing store, you go up to the counter, and then you leave without the clothing, versus people who go and actually buy the clothing. Actually, they track more negative thoughts in the people who purchase the clothing, because then there's buyer's remorse.
Always.
But all of the positive aspects of that shopping experience were maintained, and the only reason is because your brain imagines it. You put the clothes on your body and you're like, wow, that's how this would look. Or you even picture yourself in a suit that you would want. Like, our brains are much more, we should use our imagination for good more than worry.
Well, good thing then that we're all by ourselves in our houses a lot of the time. This imagination has been able to get a lot of exercise. And what I like what you're saying right there is that I think those are the reminders, I think, that because we're in a political climate right now, that our television stations and our creators and our our actors and our actresses and our comedians, because we're in a political climate, they're not using those energies to really take us out of this or help us through this. Instead, they're everybody's fuel. Everybody's just piling on more fuel. But what you just said right there is actually where our entertainment industry should be in. They should have stayed in their lane the entire time. Musicians should stay in their lane. Actors should stay in their lane. And I have said this, Trinity, this is what I was talking about. Exactly what he just mentioned. What I was saying is, here at a moment where we need our sports, we need our music, we need our television, our movies to kind of help get through these difficult times. Instead, they've all jumped in the stress game, and they're all talking about the most stressful topics that we want to break away from. So where do you break away? There's nowhere to break away then, because all of our outlets for stress relief have all jumped into the serious game, and all at once, and that's really not good. I mean, it's okay to use your platform, if you're like the only one using your platform in a time where everybody's like distracting, right? But when we actually do need some distraction right now, everybody's using a platform. And so, what you're saying right now is very timely, I think, to where we're at. At least that's how I interpret it.
I agree. I mean, and that's part of the reason why, like, even you and I, when we do our stuff, we try to limit the amount of, like, coronavirus or Black Lives Matter topics that we cover, because, there are other things happening in the world, and I think that's what I see as far as our job, anyways, is to help kind of not only distract from that, but then to help people to cope with it.
Well, the way I look at it is like, look, we know diabetes is an issue all around the world. It's always been an issue. It's been an issue a very long time. But our job is we deal with the disease of addiction, we deal with mental health issues, and we deal with other stuff, right? So we just understand that there's some people out there that are doing darn good work in diabetes. Now, should we hear something so overt that we need to say a sentence or two, then we do. But overall, our overall day is not filled with diabetes, because that's not where we sit. That's not the pocket we sit in. But also, when we do our shows on mental health issues and substance abuse, we also joke around a little bit. Here, Johnny's been on. We've talked about coronavirus, and we're not crying. We've talked about coronavirus, and we're not talking about the thousands, the hundreds of thousands of people that died. Because, again, you have to be able to also laugh sometimes and joke around and have all different types of emotion about the same topic. Unfortunately, we're being told that there's only one emotion to have per topic. And when we get into this idea that there's only one emotion to have on a topic, and if you think outside that emotion, you're not being serious, you're not being respectful of the topic, I think that's when we get into a little bit of trouble. So what I liked about having Johnny on today about talking about his coronavirus is that we had him on after, he's on the tail end of it, and able to speak all the way through of like all the experiences that he had with it, knowing that he may be in a category of individuals that could have suffered a great deal. By the way, let's not forget, Johnny did start off by saying, I'm asthmatic. So if there's a group of individuals that should be very afraid of coronavirus, it would be an asthmatic individual. Yeah. So I don't want to not know more of that. I do want to know more of that, because I don't know what type of testing we have available to see how does that affect the asthma in the future. Because we really don't know, right, Johnny? We don't know if you can get it again even. Like, In one part of my head, I'm thinking, all right, so you've already had it. So September 26th, when the Hope-a-thon comes around, Johnny can actually be with us in Orlando to do the Hope-a-thon. And then a part of me is saying, but he could get it again, right? I mean, is that a possibility? Because
nice
I've heard
plug,
stories of people,
by the way,
getting it again. I'm good at that.
Very nice.
I'm a professional,
plug.
Trinity. So can you get it again? Like, is that where your head is at now? Like researching, like, okay, how did this affect me long term? If so, or can I get it again? Or am I still careful? Or do you now walk around like saying, I'm invincible, bitches. What you got? You know what I mean? Like, how do you go about? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's all of those things. but here's the truth. Here are a couple basic truths. Number one, why would I start on my thumb? Number one,
I do like the thumb.
Okay, I'll do that. Number one, thumbs up. I can't go anywhere and ignore the masks and social distancing guidelines. You can't really get away with it. You know what I'm saying? So even if I was like, I'm a superhero, I would still wear a mask and social distance out of sheer respect for the people around me. So that's number one. It's not about whether or not I think that I can't go around being like, oh, it's okay, I can kiss you. I've had COVID before. People be like,
yeah.
So number one, I'm adhering to those guidelines no matter what, whether I've had it or not. Number two,
respect, though. Out of respect. Not because you fear getting again. Or
dude,
you're getting again?
Well, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
So
okay. Sorry,
number two, yeah, this is two, I guess. So number two, we don't know anything about the long-term effects, or I shouldn't say we don't know anything. We don't know enough because it's only been less than a year since we even knew this existed. So it's like people say like, oh, vaping is safe. And it's like, well, yeah, but you know what I'm saying? So number two, we don't know enough about the long-term effects. Number three, I want to make sure that I understand where we are with research. So some people say that there's the odds of getting COVID again are bananas low, like crazy low. Like I can go donate antibodies for someone to use against coronavirus. So the idea that I could get coronavirus again is, in my head, I'm like, the odds are infinitesimally small. However, the odds were kind of pretty small of me getting it in the first place, depending on how I was living. So right now I'm trying to balance, like, do I go on planes? Or do I just go to the gym with my mask on and distance from people? Or do I go to restaurants? So I'm trying to figure that out right now. I would definitely want to see more people, but I don't see myself, like, going to a large group anytime soon. I think I just see myself restoring a little more balance in my life and not spending an entire month in a 15-foot by 10-foot bedroom. Which is pretty big, all things considered.
That's a pretty big bedroom.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I knew a 90-plus-year-old woman who not only survived it once, then was tested negative, and this is months ago, just tested positive again. This is a person within my orbit, so I know that it can happen. At least it did with this person.
Don't tell me that. Ignorance is bliss. I want to live in a world where that can't happen.
I'm telling you that because what I'm wondering is if the people around her thought, okay, it already passed through here. We're good. So now we can be a little bit more reckless. And I think what I'm kind of saying is that I think we all still need to be a little bit careful because there is a lot of unknowns, right? Yep. And it's like world, right? It's like real world. Like for people that live this YOLO life, well, it's only because you haven't died. But the moment the moment you start thinking about your dead friends and that have gone out there and did some things that are no longer here with us, and you speak to their families, you look at your own mortality a little bit different as well when you lose somebody real close to you doing a lot of the same activities you did. And you start saying, you know what? I don't want my mom to feel like that. I don't want my dad to feel like that. So I think I have to live a little bit differently so that my kids aren't left without the dad like this person's kids are or something like, you know what I mean? It just changes. And I think this is one of those situations where there's so many unknowns that you almost have to just respect that you have to continue to be careful, continue to be open to other ideas and the research that is still yet to come. And if you can participate in any of that, then maybe say yes. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to knock on your door and give you like a star to wear, if you have to wear it where you go, or whether they're going to
1940s Germany here.
Some blood. I'm just saying, brother. You don't know where we're going to go.
Well, what's funny is that's what I tell my kids all the time, right? Like when I'm trying to tell them to avoid certain things, and they're like, "Well, this happened." I was like, "I'm not worried about the 1,000 times that it goes right. I'm worried about the one time it goes wrong.
Yeah,
is it worth it?"
Yeah. I think I'm just trying to treat it like so. Basically, since COVID was a thing, I've been trying to treat everybody like they have COVID and treat myself like I have COVID. So just trying to assume and operate within those guidelines. And I want to continue doing that. Only am I more likely to go to the gym now than before? I think yes. And a big part of that comes from me feeling like, okay, if there's a 99.99% chance that I can lift weights with a mask on away from other people and not catch COVID, my sanity, I need to balance you got to think like I spend half the year on tour. So different city every day, meet a couple hundred people every day. And then when I'm home, I leave my house several times a day for exercise, for social purposes, for meetings, and sitting in a home for weeks or months at a time, what that's done to my brain has caused enough damage to the point where I'm like, if I can get away with going on a walk or going on a bike ride, or even the other day I went on a drive for the first time in my life, like it's freaking 1950. and I needed to leave.
Did you
so I
get your
think I'm
isotoner
much more
gloves, too?
likely. I'm much more likely to leave my house now, but I still have to be conscious because nobody knows much of anything right now still.
Well, you're touching on something that I actually wouldn't mind dedicating the last probably 15 minutes we have now on the show, right? At the top of the show, I mentioned that you have the thing called Cope Notes, and this is going to be your opportunity to talk a little bit about that. But I also want to dive into kind of what brought it about and your mentality in pursuing that, right? Because full disclosure, anybody who's been watching this know this, but I don't know if you do or not. But Louis and I are in agreement that a large majority, if not all, but a large majority of our current issues are our inability collectively to cope with things, right? Like a lot of these like school shooting things. People think, oh, it's mental health. Yeah, mental health, but not because he's crazy, but mental health because nobody knows how to cope with things anymore, and then they take it out on others. Like, even with the drug usage and addiction, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, it's inability to cope with things, so I reach out for this. And then that turns into a problem way bigger than I thought it was going to. And so one of our pet peeves, if you will, or our focuses and everything that we do is cope. Learning how to just navigate the stresses of life. And so Cope Notes, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to talk now. I really like the concept behind Cope Notes. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love that you brought up the idea that it's not about a diagnosis. Like, it's not necessarily when we think mental health, we think oh, that person has schizophrenia, and it's like, okay, well, what if a doctor never told them that? Right. Then what? So I don't like operating within the world of diagnoses. I'm not a clinician. I trust clinicians. I work with clinicians. Cope Notes has a clinical oversight panel, so we collaborate with clinicians, but I'm personally not one, and I think we kind of need to change the way we think about mental health, because we think mental health applies to people with a diagnosed condition or a diagnosable condition. And we neglect to realize that when we feel worry or anxiety or frustration or doubt or guilt or any of those things, even when we're judging ourselves, when we're nervous for a job interview, all of these things are related to our mental and emotional health. Even stress. If you've ever been stressed in your entire life, ever, even once, that is a mental health concern. So we need to kind of change the way we think about mental health. But ultimately, Cope Notes was it was an answer to what I was looking for. So if you think about mental health on a spectrum, I'd say there are around 2.5% of people who need critical licensed care. These people need they need to be connected with a crisis counselor. They need to be like inpatient. And I've been there. That's the 2.5% on the left end of the spectrum. On the right end, there's 2.5% of people who are living in a fairy tale where their parents are still married and they have a really healthy relationship with their siblings, and they were never made fun of at school, and they just sort of won the genetic lottery, and they just are nailing it. I've never met anyone in this 2.5%. So if you ever do, like, capture them and we can study them. Now, the 95% of people in the middle, it's people who aren't perfect and people who don't need critical care. They're not in crisis. And I would say that most of the time I'm not in crisis. I wouldn't need to cut somebody in line to speak to a crisis counselor. But I still need mental and emotional support. There's room to improve. I want to learn how to manage the way that I feel, the way that I think. I want to learn to manage that better. And that's what Cope Notes is for. I would say maybe it's not for the unicorns over here. And maybe it's just a supplement for the people here who are getting real clinical treatment. But for the 95% of people in the middle who are just having difficulties with any of the things that I said, stress or anxiety or loneliness or worry or frustration or anger, jealousy, whatever that thing is, Cope Notes is a tool that educates people and helps them train their brain to handle these things more efficiently. So in a sentence, Cope Notes trains your brain to think healthier thoughts over time.
I want to add something right there, because you said for the 95% of people who are having difficulty, and so right when you said the word difficulty, it's like I wanted to pause you. because I think, more correctly stated, it's for the 95% of the people that do experience life on a regular.
Oh yeah, for the
experience,
95% of people who are human beings.
Yeah, exactly. It's experiencing life. So if you're a normal person, and so this is my little advertisement for you, because it's real. And so for everybody watching or listening to this, I don't work for Cope Notes, don't get anything from Cope Notes. He doesn't pay us any money. I'm simply saying this because I like Johnny. I like where Johnny comes from. I like the ideology behind it, and I believe in his mission. And so when I hear of what he said, and I've read the Cope Notes, I've gotten a few of them. He did that for us when he did the Couch Live, so that we got a couple of days of experiencing what that would be like to wake up and get these, or throughout the day they would come. So what I'm saying is for anybody just experiencing life, if you're not so busy hiding or distracting yourself, or melting away, or so intoxicated that you don't want to deal at all, or you're so arrogant and narcissistic that you don't think that there's anything out there that can ever teach or help or support, then it's not for you. It's not for those outliers. But that whole middle piece that he just explained, for all the individuals that are just experiencing it, regardless of how you're experiencing it, whether you're experiencing it well and you don't feel like you need any kind of support, but you do realize support's good, for other people support's good, I just don't really feel like I need it right now, you're still in that middle. Mm-hmm. Those people are still in that middle, because here's the issue. Along comes COVID, right? So you had a lot of very, very, and I'm going to go back to your business scenario that you used earlier, a lot of very talented, smart, business-minded individuals that had successful businesses for decades. All of a sudden, along came COVID, and along came everything that came with COVID. And then along with COVID came some other scenarios that just didn't fit right together. And as both these two perfect stormish things hit and collided, there's a lot more businesses that have been gone under because of it. And those are very competent, smart individuals. And yet they're struggling with the most basic essence of math, because in the most basic sense and essence of math in business is there has to be something incoming. There has to be something incoming. And so even if you understand the mathematics of a business, and you understand, the advertising, and you understand all the complexities of a business, at the end of the day, it still requires outside factors. And that's your emotion. Your emotional health still relies on outside factors and outside conditions. So as much as you may be a strong person, as much as you may be an intelligent person, an emotionally available person, a person that's able to process through very difficult emotions very well, there's still, along comes COVID. And I don't know what your COVID is, and some of us don't know what our COVID is, but they exist. These are things that exist out in the real world. And so it's for those kinds of days, and for the regular days that all mounted together, they create a COVID type day. Because sometimes that's what it is for people too. They're just sidestepping just a tiny bit, and after a year or two in, they realize, I've sidestepped so much, I'm completely way off the path so far that I can't even see the original path that I was on. And so it's that kind of stuff. It's just maintenance. The same kind of maintenance you do on your vehicle. You don't wait for your front windshield to be full of bugs. Every once in a while, you just do the wipe. whether you need to really clean them really hard or not, you don't have the same frontal vision, so you just wipe, right? You just hit the water, wipe it once, and it's that kind of thing. So that's how I view your Cope Notes. It's like constantly, every once in a while, just wipe it once a day.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and give my own little pitch here then, just to piggyback on the both of you guys, right? In the perspective
so you're kind of heavy, so don't piggyback so long.
Right? No, what I'll say is so I was one of those individuals, right, that thought that I was good, that I didn't need anything. Yeah. I was absolutely wrong, right? I was carrying around a lot of trauma and a lot of anger and rage towards that trauma, and it really impacted every aspect of my life. But because I was so successful in other areas, I thought it was everybody else. It couldn't be me. They're all just stupid, So, in the health and fitness world, right? Because in addition to the spiritual thing, I obviously am a master trainer. And I couldn't tell you how many clients would come to me thinking that I would help them lose weight or achieve whatever physique that they were looking for, and then they were done. And I was like, no. Once you reach that point, that's when the fun starts, because now you got to maintain whatever that is. You got to continue to do at least something to keep what you just got. And so in the spiritual world, same thing, right? I've had many people who think that once they read a book or once they achieve certain, taste of enlightenment, if you will, or some sort of like, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me, then they're done. Or like forgiveness. I forgave them once and I'm done. No, it's now you got to maintain it and keep it going. And that looks different for different people. Some people are able to sit down and read a book, every couple of days or every day. Some people are able to go to, classes or speeches or whatever it may be. Some people listen to this podcast. Who knows? But some of us get kind of busy or whatever, and we don't necessarily have the time. So what I like about the concept of Cope Notes, and I did not get a couple of them. I just know what he was talking about, and I checked out the website a little bit. And the way I interpreted it was, even for people who feel as if they've achieved whatever level of mental health that they want, this is a way to keep you honest. This is a little kind of subliminal way to remind you daily, hey, just if you are so good and awesome and you got it all figured out, great. Then prove it real quick by just reading this and having your own little mental moment with it and then moving on with your day. It takes all like 2 or 3 minutes potentially, maybe even more if it's that in depth. But bottom line is, if you think that you're doing well, you're less likely to pause and actually go and work on it, right? You're less likely to pick up, because I've had so many people come to me and tell me when they first hear some of the teachings and stuff, like, oh my God, that's so awesome. And then that same person 8 months later will come to me and say that they don't do it anymore. And I ask them why, and they say, well, because it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, what were you doing every day to make sure you made it a part of your life? And I'm like, well, no, I mean, I got it. I was like, so you stopped doing it and it stopped working. Is that what I'm hearing? Well, when you put it like that, well, that's the point, right? Our hubris catches up to us. And we start to think, oh, I nailed it, so I'm good. And then you don't do the work anymore. And then you're trying to live off of all your old, your old work. And it just doesn't work that way. And so what I like about it is, even the days where things are going well and you're moving through your day and whatever, and you think that you're on the right track, this little thing might pop up, you read it, and it gives you a pause to like, well, let me address it. And then that just keeps training your mind to stay into the healthy mindset. So for me personally, that's what I love about it, because I am 100% firm believer in the fact that we as a society collectively suck at coping. We just do. We suck at coping. Nothing we look at promotes coping. It's not the cool thing to do. There's not really cool shows that say, oh, that person who's mentally healthy is my hero. No, we typically idolize the people who are really struggling with stuff, who really need a lot of help. The poor people, the ghetto people, the angry people. Those are who we idolize and want to be like for some reason. I don't know why. But it's the ones who are like mentally put together and doing well that we're like, oh, no, they're weird. And so it doesn't encourage us to look after our own mental health, and that irritates the hell out of me. So
we're great at reacting, Trinity. We're just great at reacting.
We are great at reacting. Not well, but reacting.
Yeah.
So that is pretty much our time. So I'm going to give everybody just a couple minutes. Any wrap up, any final thoughts? Johnny, do me a favor, and as you're talking, make sure you tell people how they can get a hold of you and see more about it. And if you want, feel free to put it into the chat here on Facebook Live so they can kind of go directly to it if you want. So here's your time, my friend.
Yeah. If you want to learn anything about Cope Notes, you can go to copenotes.com. Every single thing that you would need, like we have a podcast, we have merchandise, we have obviously subscriptions that I hope you actually use. We have lots of information on our website, and it's just copenotes.com. If you want to find me on social media, on Facebook, my name is Johnny Crowder. On Instagram, my handle is @JohnnyCrowderLovesYou. Because I do.
Aww.
And the last thing that I'll say before I hop off is, if you're listening to this right now and you think all of this stuff that they were talking about doesn't apply to me, it applies to my neighbor, it applies to my fiance or whoever, let me just ask you this. Have your teeth ever gotten so white that you decided that you'd stop brushing them? Just think about that. And then ask yourself if you want to check out Cope Notes or not, because it's a good way to keep yourself honest. There are things that you do every day, whether you think about them as self-care or not. You are actively taking care of yourself every day, and this is a toothbrush and floss for your brain. So if you think it won't do you any good, I want to call you out and challenge you right now, and at least check it out.
Very good, Louis.
I don't even know what to say to that.
That was awesome.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And no, Johnny, my teeth aren't white enough, but thank you very much for pointing that out. No, not really. I was kidding. Here's look, I love having Johnny on. He was on the Couch Live. Now he's on the Dharma Time. I think he's just one of these really special young men that show us a lot of different things. I can see a lot of topics that I would love to have with Johnny, because he's so honest. There's just an authenticity about you, Johnny. And so when we heard that you had COVID and you were going through it, we knew that we would get a good authentic expression of the fear, the anxiety, the hope that comes with it, all the stuff that you can have. And so many of you out there that are listening or watching this, you know somebody or have a loved one that has gone through this. I know there was at least somebody that I know wrote on our Facebook Live that they had somebody very close to them have COVID, or their cousin or something like that. And so also for the family members, they get worried, they get concerned. Look, the real deal is this, like any other issue that may happen in our life, there's a lot of unknown that comes with it. But the good thing is that there are ways to at least be able to deal with the emotions that we can handle and then we can control. And I think that's what something like Cope Notes and things that Johnny was talking about. There's some things that you are able to control, like what you read or what you subscribe to or what you put in place in your life, so that you have a daily reminder of some sort of get back on track, or daily reminder of let me at least come back down to the reality of what is, because it's so easy, especially right now, to be swayed in a different direction by so many outside entities. There's a lot of entities right now that want to take you to certain emotions. They want to take you to the emotion of rage or anger or frustration or anxiety or stress, because they're trying to promise you something that if you come in our direction over here, all these things that we're kind of forcing you to experience will go away if you believe with what we're doing, or if you come with us. And it's so reminiscent to me of what drugs were like in my own head. That it came with so much promise. It reminded me, when I was using, as much as I thought I was getting a lot of relief from it, all it kept reminding me of is how horrible life was and how horrible everything was and people were. And so it built up this rage, and the whole time I became like a friend to the substance, even though it was pointing out all this stuff to me, even though it was ineffectively using all these real life issues and making them overly dramatic. It just made me more dependent upon that substance. So I don't want to take this in another direction, other than at least what Cope Notes does. It keeps you grounded for that little bit of second, that little bit of moment. But bigger than Cope Notes itself are people like the Johnnies of the world that we're able to highlight and speak to, and know that there's some very young people out there with some very cool ideas that are a little bit different. We no longer have to just, like you said, rub salt in the wounds or rub dirt in the wounds and shake it off, kids. Even though, Johnny, I still believe in that. And shake it off. Just don't put salt in it like my brother did. He made me put salt in the wound, telling me that was going to heal it. And well, it sounded believable, because when they do peroxide, it hurts as well. So how would you not know that salt? Yeah, it hurts, but there's no healing power whatsoever. It's just the pain. But the point is that there's a lot of young people out there from generations differently than yours that you may be watching or listening that are very inspirational in nature. So thank you very much, Johnny, for being that inspiration for old dogs like me. And I appreciate you being on with us today. Thank you very much.
Right on. Very well put. First and foremost, let me thank everybody for watching, and by all means, make sure you follow us on social media. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and share with your friends if you feel that there's any value in it. Of course, as far as a podcast, we're on everything: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all that stuff. Social media, you can catch us on. He's at the Dope Doctor. I'm at the Dharma Guy, and of course, we are at WPSN99, and go ahead and check out at Now Matters More while you're at it. And yes, I too want to echo a lot of what he just said. Johnny was, I was really excited when I found out that we were going to have you on, man. And you didn't disappoint. You got a good vibe about you, man. You seem like you just got a good head on your shoulders, and I think that you provide value to anybody and everybody in your orbit, man. So I'm proud to know you, and hopefully this isn't your last time on either the Couch Live or Dharma Time.
It's coming on the Hope-a-thon, Trinity.
Right on. I like it. So having said all that, I won't do the 3 tips today. I'll just kind of rehash kind of what we were talking about, and that is, I think the important part that we got out of this is coping and hope. There's a lot of people right now. There's a lot of things happening in the world that, you could very easily concentrate on, and it can ruin your whole day. And my advice to you is don't let it. Allow yourself to pay attention to the realities of things around you, but don't get so caught up into that you think that's the only reality or that's the only thing happening, because there's a lot of hope in the world. There's a lot of great things, and this too shall pass. We will get on the other side of this. Things will get better. We will get back to some sense of normalcy. We might have to change our definition of what normal looks like, but we will get to the other side where we'll eventually be saying to each other, hey, remember that COVID thing that happened? Like, we will be at that point. I don't know when, but we will get there. And I think the things that's going to help us get there is collectively knowing how to cope with things differently, learning how to express ourselves, learning how to appreciate everybody's different perspectives, and understanding that it's okay. It's okay to not know. It's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to be okay, even. Don't feel guilty if you're not really affected by all this stuff. But more importantly, stay focused, man, and just keep chugging right along, really, is all I got to say. There is a quote that I want to leave us with, and then we'll skedaddle out of here. By all means, if we'll probably stick around afterwards. Johnny, you're free to go if you want, but we typically hang out just a few minutes afterwards to answer any questions and just sign off. But there was a quote that I came across the other day that sort of applies here, and I want to say it anyways, and that is, if the problem has a solution, it's not really worth getting frustrated and angry and worrying about, because it has a solution. And if the problem doesn't have a solution, worrying about it's not going to solve it. And I know that's not an exact quote, but the sentiment gets across. So I think that's all I got for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. And for those of you who are going to stick around, I'll see you in a few minutes. But until then, now that you know better, do better. Peace. Are you still here? What are you doing? I told you, go do better.